When we say that Iman is reflected, not claimed, we are acknowledging one of the most uncomfortable truths about the human soul. Because anyone can say they believe, anyone can memorize religious vocabulary, quote a verse, or nod along to reminders. But the heart is not exposed by the tongue. It is exposed by what the limbs do when the world isn't looking. Faith isn't something you merely speak. It's something that inevitably leaks into your behavior. You can hide behind excuses, behind intelligence, behind charisma, behind public appearances, but you cannot hide behind your actions. They will always betray the truth of what resides inside. A person with strong Iman doesn't need to announce it. You see it in how they speak, how they carry themselves, how they respond to anger, how they manage temptation, and even how they treat people who cannot benefit them. You see it in their presence long before you hear it from their tongue. That's because a man, when it is real, shapes the internal compass. It doesn't only dictate belief, it dictates behavior. It begins in the heart, but it doesn't stay in the heart. And when it does stay in the heart without ever appearing in the person's manner or choices, that's a sign that something is fundamentally off. Faith that never shows itself is faith that is weaker than the person wants to admit. And this is where the struggle begins for all of us, because we live in a time when identity is everything. People are quick to say, I have a good heart, or Allah knows what's inside me. And yes, Allah does know what's inside us. But Allah also told us repeatedly that faith must manifest in action. Even the Quran pairs belief with action over and over. Because belief without action becomes a claim, and action without belief becomes hypocrisy. The balance between the two is what defines the truth of a person. If someone claims to believe but their actions contradict that belief, the contradiction itself becomes a mirror. It forces you to ask, what is really happening inside the heart? Because the limbs react to what the heart desires. If your heart leans toward Allah, your actions will lean toward obedience. If your heart leans toward this world, your actions will lean toward its temptations. And no one needs to announce which direction they are leaning, the actions announce it for them. This is why self-deception is one of the greatest spiritual dangers. A person can convince themselves that they are spiritually secure simply because they feel something emotionally when they hear the Quran, or because they occasionally feel guilty after sinning. But emotions come and go. Guilt comes and goes. The real testimony of a man is whether you act on that guilt, whether you turn those emotions into commitment, whether you allow conviction to become transformation. Otherwise, you end up relying on a fantasy version of yourself, living off the illusion of Iman rather than its reality. And this illusion is powerful. We all have moments where we feel spiritually high, moments of clarity, moments where guidance touches the heart. But the question is not whether you felt something. The question is whether you lived it. If you feel spiritually inspired for 5 minutes but live in contradiction for the next 5 days, the 5 minutes cannot be used as evidence of faith. Iman is not measured by peaks. It is measured by patterns, and patterns are built by actions. This is why the early generations would say, Iman increases and decreases. It increases with obedience. It decreases with sin. That means every action you take is either building your Iman or eroding it. There is no neutral ground. You are always moving either toward Allah or away from Him. And because these movements are subtle, gradual, and often unnoticed, your actions become the clearest indicator of which direction you're headed. Think of it like the health of the body. A person may feel healthy, but the body reveals the truth, energy levels, strength, symptoms, performance. Similarly, a person may feel that they have faith, but Iman reveals itself through how you behave under pressure, in secrecy, in routine, and in hardship. Anyone can appear righteous in public, in moments of ease, or when surrounded by people who expect righteousness from them. The real test is how you behave when temptation is easy, when no one is watching, when the environment doesn't pressure you toward good, and when obedience requires sacrifice. That's when the heart's true state becomes visible, and understand this is not about perfection. No one is perfect, and a man is not measured by the absence of mistakes. A man is measured by the presence of effort. The person whose heart is alive may fall, but they feel the pain of the fall. They may slip, but they rush back to Allah. They may sin, but they seek forgiveness with humility. They may struggle, but they do not surrender to the struggle. Their actions may not always be perfect, but their direction is consistent, and direction is everything. So when we say your actions expose your Iman, we are not speaking about a single moment or a single sin. We are speaking about the overall trajectory of your life. Do your actions pull you closer to Allah over time, or do they erode your connection? Do they strengthen your heart or weaken it? Do they nourish your soul or drain it? Because the body follows the heart, and the heart follows its deepest loyalties. This is why a believer spends time examining themselves, not because they seek perfection, but because they seek honesty. They want to know whether their Iman is alive, whether it's growing, whether it's breathing. They measure it through what they do consistently, not what they feel occasionally. And perhaps the most powerful realization is this: you already know the answer. Deep down, every person knows whether their actions reflect Iman or undermine it. You can hide from others, but you cannot hide from yourself. And the moment you stop running from your own truth is the moment transformation begins. Because once you accept that your actions are revealing your Iman, not destroying it, you gain the power to rebuild it. And the first step towards strengthening faith is recognizing where it has been weakened. The first step towards sincerity is admitting where insincerity has taken root. The first step toward obedience is acknowledging where disobedience has settled. And the first step toward returning to Allah is realizing that your actions have drifted you away, and that you have the ability, with His help, to realign. Your actions expose your Iman not to humiliate you, but to guide you back to who you are meant to be. When we talk about daily actions testing the strength of the heart, we are acknowledging something that every believer feels, but often struggles to articulate. Iman is not something that is tested in grand dramatic moments. It is tested in the quiet choices, in the repetitive routines, in the hours that pass without anyone noticing what you're doing. It is tested not when people applaud you, but when you live in the ordinary rhythm of the day, because your heart is shaped by what you do repeatedly, not by what you do occasionally, and every action you take, no matter how small, becomes a subtle indicator of what is happening inside your soul. You may not realize it, but every morning when you wake up and decide whether to begin your day with remembrance or distraction, your heart is being measured. When you choose between prayer and procrastination, between Quran or scrolling, between patience or irritation, your heart is being tested. You don't need a catastrophe or a miracle to reveal where your Iman stands. Life reveals it slowly, constantly, and honestly. And this is part of Allah's mercy. He allows your faith to grow through the small battles you face every single day. People often imagine that Iman weakens because of one big mistake. But in reality, Iman weakens long before the mistake ever happens. It weakens through the daily neglect of the heart. It weakens when dhikr slowly disappears, when prayer becomes rushed, when the Quran becomes a stranger, when late night worship becomes a distant memory, when sins are no longer resisted with the same discomfort they once brought. And just as Iman weakens through small neglects, it also strengthens through small consistencies. You don't become spiritually strong by doing something spectacular once. You become spiritually strong by doing something sincere repeatedly. Even if the action is small, even if no one notices, even if you feel like nothing is changing, your heart is absorbing every moment of sincerity. The Prophet taught us this principle. The most beloved actions to Allah are those done consistently, even if they are small. Why? Because consistency transforms the heart. Sporadic effort transforms emotions, but consistent effort transforms character. And this is where so many people misunderstand their spiritual struggles. They think their Iman is low because they don't feel spiritually charged all the time. They assume their hearts are weak because they are not always motivated, always inspired, always emotionally moved. But emotions were never meant to carry your faith. Emotions are waves, they rise and fall. What carries your faith is commitment, discipline, and sincerity. What carries your faith is what you do during the moments when you don't feel inspired. What carries your faith is how you respond when the heart is quiet. The real strength of your heart becomes visible when worship feels heavy, when temptation feels strong, when distraction feels easy, when life feels overwhelming. Anyone can obey Allah when their heart is soft, but the true measure of a man is what you choose when your heart feels hard, because that is when effort becomes evidence. That is when the heart reveals whether it truly longs for Allah or only longs for comfort. And you'll notice something remarkable about the heart. It adapts to whatever environment you create for it. If you fill your days with heedlessness, your heart becomes numb. If you fill your days with remembrance, your heart becomes alive. If you fill your days with sin, your desires shift toward darkness. If you fill your days with obedience, your desires shift toward light. The heart is like soil. Whatever seeds you plant daily, those seeds eventually grow roots. And once they take root, they become extremely difficult to remove. This is why the believer must pay attention to the small habits that fill their life. If you start your morning without remembering Allah, the rest of the day drifts more easily. If you skip one prayer, the next prayer becomes easier to skip. If you indulge in one sin, the second becomes easier to justify. But the opposite is also true. If you protect one prayer, you begin protecting the next. If you push yourself to open the Quran once, your heart softens the next time. If you resist one temptation, the second temptation becomes easier to resist. Small actions shape the heart more than major ones ever will. And the most telling moment, perhaps the clearest indicator of your Iman, is how you behave when you think no one sees you, because that is when the external pressure disappears. That is when your heart speaks with complete honesty. A person who chooses obedience in private is someone whose heart is truly connected to Allah. A person who only appears obedient in public, but crumbles in private, needs to revisit the inner foundations. Allah is not interested in the version of you that the world sees. He is interested in the version of you that you see when you're alone. And that version is shaped by your daily, private actions. Think about how you respond to inconvenience, how you react when someone irritates you, when something doesn't go your way, when life disappoints you. These reactions are not random outbursts. They flow from whatever has been building in your heart over time. A heart that is nourished with remembrance becomes patient. A heart that is nourished with gratitude becomes generous. A heart that is nourished with ego becomes resentful. A heart that is nourished with desire becomes impulsive. Just as your body reacts to what you eat, your heart reacts to what you allow inside. And one of the greatest truths about daily actions is this: your struggle is seen by Allah. Even if the world never sees the hours you spent fighting temptation, even if no one notices the sins you avoided, even if people underestimate the weight of your effort, Allah counts every moment. Not a single movement of your heart escapes his knowledge. When you choose what pleases him, even if it feels small, even if it feels unimpressive, it is recorded with a weight far beyond what you can imagine. Because Allah does not measure the size of the action, He measures the sincerity behind it. This is why, on the Day of Judgment, people will be shocked at the impact of actions they considered insignificant. A smile, a quiet moment of forgiveness, a hidden act of charity, a silent istighfar, a private prayer. All of these are magnified in a way that only Allah can magnify. And people will regret not doing more of these small actions, not because they were difficult, but because they were so simple and so accessible. So, when your daily actions test your heart, understand that these tests are not punishments, they are invitations. Invitations to rise, invitations to grow, invitations to strengthen your Iman one small step at a time. You are not expected to be perfect, but you are expected to care. You are expected to try. You are expected to struggle with sincerity. Because every sincere struggle echoes in the heavens. When we reflect on consistency and how it shows what we truly value, we are confronting a reality that many of us try to avoid. It's easy to speak beautifully about faith, to memorize verses, to attend gatherings, and to share inspiration. Anyone can do that. But what your life consistently demonstrates over weeks, months, and years is the real indicator of what resides in your heart. Your patterns reveal what you truly care about, even when you insist otherwise. Words may inspire others, but actions reveal the truth, and the truth is uncompromising. It doesn't bend to excuses or public approval. Your consistency or lack thereof reflects the depth of your Iman and the sincerity of your intentions. Consistency is not about performing extraordinary deeds every day. It is not about grand gestures, dramatic moments, or being perfect in every way. Rather, it is about the small, repeated acts that slowly shape your character, your heart, and your soul. The person who prays consistently, even when it is difficult, even when they feel nothing, is showing that their faith is alive. The person who maintains honesty, kindness, and humility in the everyday interactions, even when no one is watching, is revealing a heart rooted in Iman. And it is precisely this consistency that separates those whose faith is deeply ingrained from those whose faith is superficial or seasonal. We often underestimate the power of repetition in shaping who we are. Every decision we make leaves an imprint on the soul. Every repeated choice, no matter how small, becomes part of the pattern that defines us. A person who repeatedly turns to Allah in gratitude, even in trivial matters, is cultivating a heart that will find contentment and patience in greater trials. A person who repeatedly chooses forgiveness over anger is building a heart that will endure hardship without breaking. Patterns are far more telling than moments of inspiration. They are the signature of your soul, visible to Allah and eventually visible in your character. And this is where sincerity becomes intertwined with consistency. It is not enough to act consistently in front of others. Anyone can do that. The real test is how you behave when no one is watching, how you respond when there is no recognition, no applause, and no accountability outside your own conscience. Consistency in private reveals authenticity. It reveals whether your faith has taken root in your heart or whether it is a show, a performance, or a habit devoid of real meaning. A heart that consistently seeks Allah's pleasure, even in small acts, demonstrates that the heart's allegiance is real, sincere, and alive. You may ask yourself, why does consistency matter so much? The answer is simple, because inconsistency exposes what you truly value. When your actions fluctuate wildly, when you obey sometimes but neglect at other times, when you act with sincerity for a day but revert to heedlessness the next, It reveals a heart that is unsettled, distracted, and divided. You may claim that faith is important, that spirituality is your priority, but if your actions do not reflect that priority day after day, week after week, month after month, the reality is clear. Your heart values something else, consciously or unconsciously. Consistency is a mirror, and it does not lie. Think about the prophet letter, DFA, and the way he lived. Even in moments when he had every excuse to be lax, even when people did not see, his actions remained consistent. Prayer, kindness, patience, honesty, charity, these were not occasional dramatic events. They were habitual. They were patterned. They were ingrained in his life to the extent that they defined it. And that pattern of consistency is what left a mark on humanity, what transformed societies, and what became a model for every believer to aspire to. Faith, when it is alive, becomes a lifestyle, not a fleeting moment. Consistency also teaches resilience. Because life is unpredictable, challenges come, temptations arise, distractions accumulate, and pressures mount. And yet, the person who maintains consistent obedience, even in small measures, is gradually training the heart to resist, endure, and align with Allah's guidance. Faith that survives only in easy moments, faith that disappears under difficulty, is weak and vulnerable. But faith that is consistent, that persists through trials, that repeats acts of goodness regardless of circumstance, strengthens the heart, fortifies the soul, and builds a life rooted in truth. The key point here is that patterns reveal priorities. A person who repeatedly chooses prayer, kindness, honesty, and humility demonstrates that these things matter to their heart. A person who repeatedly engages in gossip, envy, procrastination, or heedlessness demonstrates that these things hold sway. And because patterns are so telling, they become a form of accountability. The world may not always see, but your heart sees. And Allah sees. The habits you form are shaping not just your day, but your soul, your character, and the ultimate trajectory of your life. Many people underestimate the cumulative power of consistency. They think that small repeated actions are insignificant. They think that a single act of worship, a single act of kindness, a single moment of honesty does not matter. But small actions, repeated consistently over time, transform the heart. They build strength where weakness once existed, patience where impatience once ruled, and sincerity where hypocrisy once lingered. Consistency is slow, often invisible, and sometimes exhausting. But it is the most reliable measure of what your heart values and what your Iman truly is. Another essential aspect of consistency is the intention behind it. Repetition without purpose can become mechanical and hollow. The power of consistency comes not just from doing, but from doing with consciousness, with dedication, with mindfulness. A person who prays consistently but does so absent-mindedly misses the full benefit of that habit. A person who gives charity consistently but does so grudgingly misses the true growth of generosity. Consistency coupled with sincere intention produces transformation. It molds the heart in alignment with Allah's guidance and creates a life of integrity, meaning, and purpose. And so, when we speak of consistency revealing what you truly value, we are inviting every believer to a moment of reflection. Look at your patterns, look at the choices you make repeatedly, look at what occupies your time, your energy, your focus. These are the clearest indicators of where your heart truly is. Words may be fleeting, emotions may be temporary, but patterns endure. They persist quietly, persistently, and inevitably. They shape not only your character, but also the spiritual reality of your life. Every believer has the opportunity to realign, to recalibrate, to transform. The actions you repeat, the habits you cultivate, The consistency you maintain, these are under your control. And when you make conscious choices, grounded in the desire to please Allah, you are not only reflecting the depth of your Iman, but actively strengthening it. You are turning faith into a living, breathing reality, visible in every decision, every response, every interaction, and every silent struggle. Your patterns expose your priorities, your values, and ultimately your Iman. They are the evidence of what you love, what you fear, and what you respect. They are not temporary, they are formative. They shape the trajectory of your life, the depth of your character, and the closeness of your relationship with Allah. And because they are so revealing, they demand honesty, mindfulness, and commitment. Consistency is not just about habit, it is about allegiance. It is about what your heart has pledged itself to, and whether your life reflects that pledge. And when you commit to living with sincere consistency, even in the small, unseen moments, you are declaring not through words, but through life itself, what truly matters to your heart. When we speak about transformation beginning with honest self-accountability, we are touching on one of the most crucial yet most challenging aspects of faith. It is easy to talk about change, to wish for improvement, to make plans for becoming better, but the reality of transformation is not in the wish. It is in the honest evaluation of oneself. True growth, true alignment with Allah, begins with looking in the mirror of the soul and acknowledging exactly where you stand, without excuses, without justification, without hiding from the truth. This is where sincerity meets action, and this is where your Iman begins to take form in tangible ways. Many people avoid this step because it is uncomfortable. It requires humility, courage, and honesty. It requires admitting that sometimes we have been negligent, that sometimes our intentions were selfish, that sometimes we have allowed desires or distractions to dominate our hearts. It is easy to point outward, to blame circumstances, to say, if only I had more time, if only I had better surroundings, if only I had more guidance. But the first and perhaps most important step in transformation is looking inward. Accountability is not about punishment or guilt, it is about recognition. It is about understanding the reality of where you are, so you can chart the course to where you need to be. This is why self-accountability is directly tied to the strength of your Iman, because your faith is reflected in your actions, and your actions are guided by your awareness of yourself. A person who refuses to look honestly at their own behavior, their own patterns, their own weaknesses, cannot expect real transformation. Change requires clarity. You cannot fix what you refuse to see. You cannot strengthen what you refuse to acknowledge. And this is why the act of honest self-reflection is a form of worship itself. It is recognizing the responsibility Allah has entrusted to you for your own heart and your own life. Think about how easy it is to deceive ourselves. We can justify actions that are inconsistent with our faith. We can delay repentance, delay effort, delay accountability. We can tell ourselves, tomorrow I will start, tomorrow I will do better, but tomorrow is uncertain. And every moment we avoid honest self-reflection, we allow patterns of behavior to solidify, we allow habits to grow unchecked, and we allow the heart to drift further from sincerity. The longer we ignore the reality of our actions, the more difficult transformation becomes. That is why immediate, honest accountability is so critical. Transformation begins the moment we stop running from our own truth, and this process is not about condemning yourself. No one is perfect, and self-accountability is not self-condemnation. It is a compassionate yet firm recognition of reality. It is a way of saying, I see what I have been doing. I understand what I need to change. I am ready to take responsibility for my actions and my heart. It requires both honesty and hope, honesty about where you are, and hope in Allah's mercy and guidance to take you where you need to go. The two must coexist, because without hope, accountability becomes despair, and without accountability, hope becomes wishful thinking. One of the most profound aspects of this process is that it creates awareness of patterns in your life. Once you begin observing your own actions without bias, you start to see the areas where your Iman is strong and the areas where it is weak. You notice where consistency is lacking, where discipline has faltered, where your heart has been distracted. And these observations are not to shame you. They are to illuminate the path forward. Awareness is the foundation of change. Without it, any effort at improvement is like navigating in the dark. You may move, but you do not know if you are moving in the right direction. And here is an essential truth. The moment you embrace accountability, you gain power over yourself. So often, we think of change as dependent on external circumstances, better environment, better people, better opportunities. But real transformation is internal. It is about taking responsibility for your own choices, your own time, your own intentions. When you stop blaming external factors, you reclaim control. And when you reclaim control, you begin to align your actions with your faith in ways that are meaningful, sustainable, and real. This is also where the heart begins to soften, because accountability is not about harshness or rigidity. It is about awareness leading to empathy for your own soul. You begin to understand why you struggled, why you failed, why you delayed. You see the forces within yourself that pull you away from sincerity, and you also see the potential within yourself to resist those forces. Accountability is like holding a mirror to your heart and saying, "This is what I am capable of, and this is what I must work on." It awakens the heart, energizes the mind, and motivates the soul. And once you accept responsibility for your own actions, you begin to understand the weight of every choice. Every habit, every thought, every decision becomes more meaningful because you see how it impacts the trajectory of your faith. You recognize that transformation is not about one dramatic gesture. It is about the accumulation of conscious, deliberate actions that reflect the intentions of the heart. It is about understanding that even small efforts, when undertaken with sincerity, have the power to reshape your character, your priorities, and ultimately your relationship with Allah. This process of self-accountability also fosters humility, because when you see your own shortcomings clearly, when you acknowledge your weaknesses, when you recognize your mistakes, you naturally turn toward Allah with reliance and dependence. Humility opens the door for guidance, for mercy, for growth. Transformation cannot occur in pride, in arrogance, or in denial. It requires the heart to be soft, the mind to be clear, and the soul to be willing to accept both truth and correction. And this is precisely what accountability cultivates. It prepares the heart to receive change. It is also important to realize that self-accountability must be honest and ongoing. Transformation is not a one-time event. It is not a checklist or a single moment of realization. It is a journey. Every day offers opportunities to reflect, evaluate, adjust, and improve. The believer must continuously assess their actions, their intentions, and their habits, asking themselves, does this reflect the Iman I claim to have? Does this align with the values I want to uphold? Am I moving closer to Allah or drifting away? This continuous practice is what ensures that accountability becomes a tool for growth, not a burden or a source of discouragement. And as you engage in this process, you will find that your actions become more purposeful, your intentions more sincere, and your heart more aligned with Allah. Transformation begins to take root in subtle ways, in how you treat others, in how you respond to challenges, in how you dedicate time to worship, in how you resist temptation. These small, consistent changes compound over time. The heart becomes stronger, the soul becomes clearer, and your Iman becomes evident not just in words, but in everything you do. Your actions expose your Iman, and transformation begins when you see that exposure clearly, honestly, and without excuses.